first 1 hour, we heard the word change quite a few times. The reality that is facing all of us right now is that change is not an option. However, acting or not is a choice that we have. At the end of the day, we are all here to make sure that the businesses we serve grow on a daily basis. When you talk to any CEO, what are they thinking right now? Every one of them has got just one thing on their mind. And there are a lot of other secondary things that are in their mind, but the one primary thing that they have in their mind is growth. This is what they are thinking about day in and day out. And it is our role as researchers to enable growth of organizations. I'm going to extensively reference a 2010 CEO study done by IBM in my presentation. When they did the study, they asked all the CEOs, what is it that keeps you awake at night? The one thing that they used, one word that they used consistently was the word complexity. What shocked me when I went through the whole article was that half of those CEOs said that their organization is not necessarily geared to handle complexity. And more importantly, over 3/4 of them felt that complexity is going to increase as we go forward. Given that the world is getting more and more complex, how do we actually solve them? Broadly speaking, there are 3 ways in which the CEOs felt that complexity can be solved to deliver growth. One is embody creative leadership. 2 is to reinvent customer or consumer relationship. And 3rd is building operational dexterity. So let's talk about each of them, because I strongly believe that each of those 3 broad buckets that I referred to have significant implications for the way we think about our function going forward. Embodying creative leadership, embrace ambiguity, take risks, and forget tried and true. These require pretty significant and bold steps on the part of people in the insights function to enable the company take big, bold, and creative steps as they march towards solving complexity. The next one is reinventing customer relationships, customer or consumer relationship, whichever way you want to look at it. We all know that never before in the history of mankind we have seen consumers getting connected to each other as strongly as they are today. The question that we have in front of us is, when the consumers are so strongly connected between themselves, how do we connect into that conversation that they are having? What do we need to do to make sure that we intersect that conversation with our brand in a meaningful way? And we need to do this in a way in which we can honor our consumers. More importantly, stay in sync with what they do. And there is an unprecedented explosion of information that is happening. How do we actually profit from that? How do we make sense from that and take it forward? Lastly, building operating dexterity. This is becoming increasingly important in really complex world today. There are lots and lots of successful companies who are out there whose product mix bears practically no resemblance to what it was 5 years ago. That's the kind of world in which we are in. And if we don't have operational dexterity, there is a very good possibility that we will find it difficult to cope with the kind of complexity that we are facing. So simplification, and then managing this whole systemic complexity that is engulfing us. And last, figure out how can we become fast and flexible as we go forward. So, if you take those 3 big buckets, the question for us as a community is, how does creative leadership in insights look like? What do we need to do differently going forward? What are the implications of reinventing consumer relationships? And what are the implications of operating dexterity from an insights industry perspective? The one thing that is very clear to all of us is that business as usual is certainly not an option that we have right now. If you take a step back, let's try and define what our role should be going forward. I'm not saying that this is the only role that we need to do, but it's just a possible definition of the role that we could possibly have going forward. Conspicuous by its absence in this definition is the absence of the word insights. Deliberately using words like provocation and inspiration, because I genuinely believe that if we can go and provoke and inspire people to take transformational action, that's what is going to enable companies to generate growth like they've never seen before. A hypothesis that I have is if we use the past to predict the future, we will have anemic growth, because the past has not been characterized by exorbitant growth, excepting for a few companies. And we saw Colgate's growth rates; they were spectacular. But if we all have ambition to grow transformationally, we need to help people to dream about the future, and more importantly, take our stakeholders there. How do we make that happen is the challenge that we have. The technology around us is changing incredibly rapidly. I was just walking out and I came back and I saw almost every table had 1 or 2 iPads. Last year, when I was there in this ARF conference, I don't think I saw a single iPad on the table. That's the kind of pace at which technology is changing. In that kind of rapidly changing world of technology, how is our role going to change? How are we going to convert that into an ally and not get intimidated by that? We can't afford to be in a fine-tuning mode. We need to really get into a rapid action mode. Our role is not about following change as quickly as possible. It is about helping companies to shape change. Our role, I would go to the extent of saying that it's not about providing insights, because insights is means to an end. It's about provoking transformation. We are very good at quantifying the expected, and we need to do that very well. But our role should be to help the companies to listen for the unexpected. Very strong functionally in terms of leveraging what we know. But how do we help companies to seek what we don't know? And more importantly, as a function, how do we know what we don't know? And this comes naturally to us. Focus on technical challenges and creating better and better tools and processes. From that, move on to becoming a lot more business focused, focus on return on investment, better execution and value creation. And all this is going to require answering some of the most fundamental questions. How do we know where the puck is going? How can we guide the business? What type of skills do we need in people to really bring inconvenient truth to the table? That's when provocation happens. How do we train ourselves to listen for the unexpected? And more importantly, how do we think about new tools and approaches to listen for the unexpected and generate provocation from that? And when we talk about executing research, focus on return on investment, better execution and value creation for the business, understand the core business drivers and make sure that whatever we do is going to materially make a big difference to the business drivers. What do we need to drive those business drivers? What can we bring to the table? Metrics is a very favorite subject of all of us. how about shifting the emphasis from backward-looking metrics to a whole lot of leading metrics, and what are they? How do we transformationally improve return on investment? To talk about where the industry is going, what we need to do to really change the business going forward, I've got a really good, strong panel consisting of Joe Tripodi, Executive Vice President, Chief Marketing and Commercial Officer of the Coca-Cola Company. He also happens to be my boss. Then we have Eric Salama, Chairman and CEO of Kantar Group. Joan, who's the Officer of Global Consumer and Market Knowledge at the Procter & Gamble Company. And Kevin Lade Keller, who's a Professor of Marketing at Tuck School of Business in Dartmouth College. Now, this is an all-star panel. So thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. So, Joan, talking about complexity, growth, creativity, etc. There's a lot of things that we do right today. In your opinion, what are the things that we do right?
Thanks, Stan, and thanks for the invitation to join the star-studded panel. I think this is a fabulous time to be in the broad consumer industries. You don't have to look very far, either in packaged goods or services or politics, to see that consumers are expressing and telling us what they want, and we need to respond. So the people who can lead and integrate and really drive those things together to get ahead of business decisions and to guide and project ahead, as you said, going from backward measuring to looking ahead, I think will be big winners. I think we do more of that today than we have in the past. I think if you look at our portfolio of what we call market research today versus 10 years ago, you'd hardly recognize it. And I think the people here are a big part of making that transition. You look at the way ROI has transformed in broad spending kinds of activities. If you look at the way learning has transformed in embracing things that are digital or science-based, I think we have a lot of threads of the future already in our hands. I'm not sure we're always doing as much with it as we can, but I know you'll talk more about that.
Okay. Eric, that's a good client-side perspective. But from a partner perspective, what are the things that we do right today which you feel proud about from a research agency perspective?
I think compared to even 3 years ago, I'm much more optimistic about what we're doing to add value to clients. I think we're doing a much better job of connecting insights, not just collecting them. So if you think about our world as being a Lego box where we're less focused on just creating the bricks and more focused on actually building something and telling a story around it, I think we're doing a much better job of actually telling those stories, of understanding cause and effect, of understanding if people watch this program on TV or they use this search term on the web, this is what they think about the brand as a result, and this is what they actually purchase. So I think our ability to connect is way ahead of where it was a few years ago. And even though I'm sure we're going to talk a lot about data and the explosion of data, and there's a whole side of our business which is the qualitative side of our business, the ethnographic side of our business, where I think we've still got and are developing fabulous people who really get to very, very deep truths amongst our consumers and can articulate that in a way that is helpful to clients.
Mm-hmm. So, Joe, you heard from a client side and an agency side, but as head of marketing and commercial, besides jet lag and burn energy drink, what else is keeping you awake at night?
Yeah. Probably the behavior of my 14-year-old teenage daughter. It keeps me awake quite a bit, actually. I would say on the business side, 3 things. One is growth. Obviously, I'm spending a lot less time worrying about individual ad performance and more time about where are the growth vectors for the company. where we need to allocate our resources. Secondly would be relevance. How do we continue to keep the brand relevant? Coke is entering its 125th anniversary this year on May 8th. It's a product that, at least from brand Coke perspective, we can't really play with the formula a lot. Otherwise, that's certain termination. So keeping it relevant in that world is very, very challenging. But I would say, and playing off of what you had mentioned in the study, one of the things that is the greatest concern to me that really keeps me up is the notion of complexity and margin dilutive complexity and how we manage all that complexity in our business system. At Coke, we're operating in 206 markets. We've got about 1.7 billion servings a day. We've got 14 million pieces of equipment. We've got 20 million customers that we're servicing every week. Within that environment and the ecosystem of not only bottlers, but customers, NGOs, governments, et cetera, it brings a level of complexity in that you rarely see in a business system, and other large companies have that also. So a lot of it is also managing, Jim Collins called it the genius of the and, so we're managing how are we global and how are we local? How do we be inspirational marketing but also operational marketing? How do we make sure that we balance brand value and brand love? We've got NGOs hammering us and saying you're the cause of all obesity in the world, but the same NGOs coming to us and say help us solve the malnutrition problems in the world. How are we great storytellers on the one hand, but at the same time leverage our scale? So manage, in that kind of wedge where you're fighting these contradictions and paradoxes in a system of that size, that represents something that that level of complexity is really what's these kind of things, growth, relevance, and complexity are really keeping me up at night.
So when you're confronted with growth, complexity, and relevance, do you believe the function is really delivering what you need to make sure that you can get a good night's sleep?
The research function?
Yeah.
Well, you got that on your last performance review, I guess. So probably somewhat indicative.
Performance review in public, yeah.
I think
Can you share that with me?
We'll make that public to the conference later. Well, I think it is and it isn't. I think it's doing a very good job in kind of the traditional areas and the traditional, but I think it's kind of this, we're operating in a completely new world, and because of that new world, we need you, as I think you were saying, be provocateurs, provide inspiration. If it's just about market research, we can go get that Watson IBM computer. We don't need any of us, but to provide that, but Watson cannot provide inspiration and provocative thinking. And I think that's what we're looking for. And I think certainly not pandering to the chairman, but Stan and his team are pushing us, and they make us, if we are uncomfortable, that is a good thing. Because if we're not uncomfortable, then we're not uncovering those insights that are going to take us to the next level. So that's how we view it.
Kevin, as a renowned marketing professor, you've seen the world change quite a bit around you over the last many years. From your perspective, from your vantage point, what do you think we should do differently going forward, if at all anything different?
Well, I think from an academic point of view, we're always trying to develop rigor and relevance in all that we do in all our academic research so that we learn more. And to Joe's point about complexity, sometimes we add to that complexity because we keep coming up with more and more factors to think about, things to sort of consider. So I think kind of going forward, to me, one of the really important things is the ability to kind of take all of that in and develop the right kind of theories and models that aren't sort of overwhelmed by this particular finding or this particular theory, but you stay balanced. And we're back to the trade-offs of that complexity that, in academic research, we're learning a whole lot about consumers and how they think and feel and act. And we're learning a lot about marketing productivity and effectiveness and all those things. But you've got this world that's changing with so many different things going on. And I think the key is not to get too much focused on this or that, to stay balanced, to make sure that you're factoring in all the right different variables. Some people are involved in social media, some are not, going through all the different kinds of tools. So I think that's the thing from an academic point of view that we need to strive for, and that whole diversity in research techniques, in marketing tactics and programs, in consumers, you have to understand, and that variety really needs to be factored into the thinking going forward.
Eric, Kevin talked about tools. So if you have to spend a few minutes dreaming about 2020 and look at your own set of companies that you have, and they all offer different kinds of tools and techniques, what do you see surviving between now and 2020? And more importantly, what do you see is the need to do now so that we are better prepared for 2020?
I think there are probably two big things that are affecting all of our businesses. One is a geographical shift in the world. I've been in Brazil, India and Turkey in the last 2 weeks. I think all of those three markets are growing 20% plus. You just compound that over a 10-year period. I can't work it out in my head, but it's probably a business that is 5 times the size it is now. Do we have the talent pool locally to be able to sustain and build a business with the same quality, improved quality, which is 5 times as good as it is now, 5 times as big as it is now? So depth of talent in the right places. P&G, Coke want great people in all of those emerging markets, and we've got a big talent issue. So I'd say talent is one thing. Digital is the other one. We need to make sure that digital isn't seen as the preserve of a digital department, but actually we understand how digital is affecting every single part of what we do. We need to understand how social media is affecting corporate reputation. We need to understand how people's behavior on the web is affecting what they purchase. I mean, all of those things, when you launch a new product, do we have the right tools that incorporate word of mouth and peer pressure? So all of those things are driven by some very, very big macro trends around geography and digital. I'd say beyond that, what tools and techniques, I think it's less about tools and techniques. I think it's more about how do we make sure that we've got people who can connect insights and not just focus on collect. And maybe we can come back to the business model, because our business model, the way that you as clients pay us, doesn't reflect, I think, what we collectively need to do going forward. But I think there's something about connecting and not collecting. And I think the other thing is we've all been very focused on what the insights are. And we're not as focused, and we need to be much more focused on how we deliver those insights. So the data visualization part of it, how we actually deliver them to you. And you had some lovely phrases about inspiring. We can't inspire you to take different actions unless we think differently about how we deliver to you and when we deliver to you. Now, there are some insights which are of value to you if I can deliver them to you today, but are of no value to you if I deliver them to you in 2 months' time. So we need to understand what is it that would help you if I can get it to you today, as opposed to I'll be 100% right and I'll give it to you in 3 months' time. So I think it's less about tools and techniques, and it's more about a culture which supports the kind of thing that you need as clients.
You very briefly refer to this whole idea of how you get compensated for the work and how that is actually holding you back. Do you anticipate that changing in the next 10 years?
I hope so. I mean, I hope we've got 2 of our biggest clients on the stage, and I hope that collectively we can do something about it together. And you've talked kind of publicly about pay for performance models, and I think that's a component of it. But if you think about our business, a lot of it is paid for on the basis of Fieldwork Plus. Now, Fieldwork Plus works in an environment in which fieldwork is the main thing that you're concerned with, and then you've got a few people who can kind of analyze it. But actually, a lot of the value that we can generate for you isn't from the fieldwork, it's from actually looking across multiple projects. So to Joe's point, it's not about the one copy test, it's about what do we learn across 1,000 copy tests. It's not one concept test or one product launch, it's what do we learn across 1,000 of them. So that requires, I think, a model where we're paying for people's time, for their thinking. I'm quite envious sometimes about the advertising agency who have got people who are on retainer, because you can actually think. I mean, you had a wonderful phrase about listening for the unexpected. It's very hard in a Fieldwork Plus model. So I do think that we need to fundamentally change.
How do you react to that, Joan?
I think we sometimes forget that we are in a business that is the intersection of human beings and business models. And at P&G, our focus, of course, is to touch and improve lives in more parts of the world more completely. And where we need to drive growth is a very human business. So I agree with Eric. We need leaders and provocative thinkers who can, in fact, look beyond field work. But one of your questions was on 2020. By the year 2020, I don't think field work is going to be our primary deliverable to anyone. And I think most businesses who would define themselves that way will not be here in 2020. So I couldn't agree more with where we need to take the industry. Roger Martin, Dean of the Rotman School of Business in Toronto, reminded me recently of one of his philosophies, which is knowledge workers need to be treated as volunteers. So not only do we have to create not just a compensation model, but really a talent pool, a body of skills and disciplines, and the rewarding work atmosphere that brings people into the field who can in fact do that work and who are inspired to do it. And I think we have a lot of work to do to make that happen for a lot of reasons. If you look around our room today and around any gathering of our industry, we have a diversity challenge. We have a challenge of what we define as research, where a lot of the creativity is coming from the more adjacent boutique, niche kind of businesses. And I think when we embrace all of those things, we have a better chance of getting to the kind of talent and the kind of business model that you're describing. But it's clearly where we need to be and where we need to be internally as well.
True. And I think, there's one firm personal conviction that I have, which I probably have shared with you a couple of times, which is you pay peanuts, you get monkeys. So we as a client have to get used to a different compensation model, because if you want better value comes with better people cost more money. So that's a reality that we need to accept.
It's also about, you talked about taking risk. The industry is increasingly procurement driven, and you do need space to kind of, to shoot the breeze. And if you went to a procurement person and said, shoot the breeze, they'd start with, well, what breeze are you talking about? And how exactly would you shoot it? And you do get into an issue of just creating space. Now, it so happens that the two of you have got procurement partners that I think really understand the business and are partners within the organization where some of that space can be created. But I'd say for the industry as a whole, there is a danger that we get into defining more and more exactly what someone's going to do and how much they're going to pay for it. And that doesn't allow you to take some of the risk that you need as a client.
Joe, you keep talking about how the whole brand building model is going to change in various conversations.
Sure.
And you have some strong beliefs around how it's going to change over the next few years. What do you think are going to be the implications of the new brand building model?
Well, everybody talks about the consumers in control. It's actually bigger than control. They want personalization. They want to be constantly entertained because it's kind of an ADD economy. They want portability of everything. They want great service. They want it all, basically. And I think when we insert ourselves in that new kind of consumer engagement model, we're really finding ourselves kind of struggling with all these different areas. We spent a lot of time earlier this year at the CES out in Las Vegas, and the things that jumped out at you were social, gaming, mobile being probably the biggest one, and understanding how all that is going to change. And it wasn't about all the gadgets, because it's not the gadgets, it's how the gadgets drive consumer behavior and change behavior. And that's critical for all of us to understand it at a much greater level of depth and detail, and that's where you folks and the industry can really help us in understanding what are the implications of all this technology that's coming on. What are the implications of all these social networks? What are the implications on gamification of the world? And that represents a lot of challenges, but also it's a very exciting time to be in marketing, quite honestly. So you can be kind of overwhelmed by it all, or you can embrace it and say, it's okay to fail. It's okay to take risk and fail. And it's fine to do that also with partners. And And just getting back to this whole notion of value-based compensation, not to pile on here, but 2 years ago we adopted to our advertising agencies a value-based compensation model. Some of them were very comfortable and some of them were a little reticent and nervous about it. Now, if you are very confident in the quality of your product, and if you believe fundamentally that it will help drive business for your clients, then you're comfortable going into a value-based compensation model. I would gladly pay a lot more money to our agency partners in the research area if they delivered for us that game-changing insight. Absolutely. Where do we sign up? And, so it's all the perspective. But I think the larger issue for us is navigating, helping us as a research community, helping us navigate all this consumer engagement change that's occurring. Because right now it's not at the level of sophistication that we need it to be, and we need some standards around measurement and calibration in this area. And I'm glad to see some of the associations coming together to pioneer that. But I'd also say another area that we need help at a client level is all in the area of sustainability. When can we get some common measurement platforms around sustainability that we can look at consistently? Because everybody can stand up and make wild claims on carbon savings or water this or that. So to the degree that we could get some standardization in that sustainability space, that would also be helpful for us and kind of level the playing field. So it's a period of great change and turmoil, but also a period of great excitement. And as I always say, if you don't like change, you'll like irrelevance a hell of a lot less. And so we have to embrace this change and run with it. And we're trying to do that. And Stan we're lucky to have somebody like Stan at Coke to help us navigate this.
So Joe, I think the sheer change around us makes this a really exciting time to be in research or broadly defined fields around consumers or commercialization. I think the change sometimes leads us to complexity because we forget that we're solving really simple problems in the end.
Yep.
We get almost ideological about the solutions, like this is going to be the thing that will replace everything. Everything will be mobile, or everything will be digital, or everything will be neuroscience. In the end, it won't be those things.
Right.
It'll be humans.
That's right.
And the human being power in the world, and we have to migrate a little bit from thinking about consumers as the people we are targeting to consume our products as human beings whose lives we're going to improve in very small ways.
Yep.
We are driving things into availability that make people's lives a little bit better, a little bit at a time.
That's right.
And if we keep focused on that, if we answer the business question and the person question, instead of thinking about methods almost as ideologies or methods that serve individual niche needs, we're in a much better position. So where we can transform that internally, where we have partners externally who can do that, and where we have people who can tell stories that can motivate change, we have tremendous success. We often instead compartmentalize things, and you can sometimes pick out the researcher in the room, whether from an internal client side or supplier side, as the person who starts by saying, well, first we did this, and first we did that, and we got these two findings, and by that time the whole room's gone. Instead of starting to say, this is what someone experiences, this is what they want, and this is where we need to go. And I think it's very easy to be almost overwhelmed by the complexity instead of using that as there really is a simple underlying problem here.
Well said.
Yeah, I think and I think it comes back to, we keep on talking about it, and as an industry we don't do enough about it. It's the talent issue. We have not got a way of developing as many people as we need to, and in some markets our industry isn't as attractive to young graduates as it ought to be. We were talking earlier on about Japan. Japan is a market where the market research industry doesn't have a high enough status to attract the caliber of people we need into the industry. Mm-hmm. So, and instead of just poaching from each other, whether it's clients from agencies or agencies from agencies, we have to find ways of making what we do as exciting to some of the young talent as it actually is, and bring them in and developing careers. Because without that, everything that Joan talks about, we're not going to achieve.
It's not going to happen. Kevin, I did an interesting exercise recently. I graduated out of a business school 25 years ago, and I pulled out my marketing management book by Philip Kotler, and I had a copy of the latest version written by you and Philip Kotler. It bears no resemblance. It has changed so dramatically in a 25-year time frame.
It's much more expensive.
Where do you see marketing going? And therefore, what is the implication for us? Because you've seen it all. You've seen the evolution of marketing over the last.
Well, I mean, it's one of those things, and you're absolutely right. You revise the book every 3 years, and sometimes it's like when you see your kids over short periods of time, you don't realize how much they changed till you look back longer, and then you realize there's been a lot of change. And I've just finished a revision cycle, so it's very, very up to speed on that. There are all these major trends, and I think, whether it's globalization, whether it's about the environment, it's about with the consumer, technology, all these things we talk about. I think the thing that we have really worked hard on is to understand that and embrace that in some sense, and I think you're hearing that from the panelists, that that's happening, but at the same time not to be overwhelmed by that. And I think that's the thing. When I look at marketing now versus the 25, and I used the, third edition, I think 30 years ago or something, it was very much stylized with 4 Ps and, these certain ways of approaching kind of marketing and thinking about it. And that clearly doesn't work as well now. There's not really 4 Ps. I mean, you can't really think of 4 Ps anymore because that traditional way of product and place and promotion, it's all gotten so much more fragmented and diversified. So the thing I think is that ability, and I think we've heard it again from the panelists, but is not to be overwhelmed by complexity. And I think the one thing that's crucial, and I think Joan was alluding to this, I think Joe alluded to this, and Eric actually in their comments, is to be able to structure things, to not get imbalanced, to take all of this in. And I think that's the one place where I see marketing going, is to be truly more holistic, understanding consumers as people, realizing that any research approach has pluses and minuses. So holistic and integrated in the thinking. And I think that's going to be the really important thing for the research industry to be part of, is to help marketing simplify but not oversimplify, to get those insights, to do the transformation that you talked about, but do it obviously in a thoughtful, meaningful, creative, inspired way. And I think that's where I see the field going. I think there's all the trends towards personalization, all the trends towards globalization. All these things are happening, but as a marketer and with brands, I have to make sure I'm doing these in the right way, and I need to have the thinking that's going to allow me to do that. And I think that's going to inform the research industry as well as all the marketing people out there.
I mean, I think one thing that's interesting in all of that is our ability to do smart analytics is accelerating. And you talked about the explosion of data earlier on. It really is overwhelming. And in 10 years' time, God knows the amount of stuff that will be out there. And yet our ability from an analytic point of view to kind of look at cause and effect is increasing very, very rapidly. And we can do stuff now that we couldn't do 3 years ago to great effect. I worry a bit that in all of that, our analytic ability will shoot much further ahead than some of the stuff that Joan's talking about in terms of understanding why people are behaving. And the kind of what and the why are quite important. And at the moment, our what and our analytic ability is increasing so fast that we just need to make sure that we don't lose that kind of human emphasis on understanding why people are behaving the way that we observe them to be behaving.
Yeah, I remember one of the ARF board meetings, a board member made what I thought was a very profound statement. And she said we should be not just focused on the what and the so what, but we should also be really focused on the now what. And that makes a big difference. That takes action to a slightly different level. And that phrase stuck in my mind. So, the whole analytics going ahead, if you don't keep in focus the now what, we might just be doing analytics for the sake of analytics.
I think that highlights, though, how much the industry needs to change and how much more sophisticated we need to be and how much more integrative we need to be across. So if you think to 2020 and methods and capabilities that will survive, I think in each case, each big bucket of the work, whether it's analytics or behavioral sciences or the deep insight ethnographic kinds of work that you talked about, they all need to get stronger and have more depth. And we may need people who are more specialists than in the past, where we have largely had people who can look across these things. And the elevated role of the person then who needs to integrate across is a very hard person to find.
Right.
And I think that talent comment that you've made a couple of times, Eric, is important. And we can't attract people into the field until they're seeing the work that's inspiring to them. And I believe we have many people who can, in fact, do that work. We don't always set them up to do it. And we don't always give them the challenges to do that. So the biggest things we cultivate in people is the integrative ability and, frankly, courage. Because what I still find very often across the research industry is a little bit of a comfort level by being advisors. Or the pinnacle of what we're aiming for is to be like consultants. No, we shouldn't be like consultants. We should be the people who have as much to lose on the line in our businesses as anyone else. And when I hear the research industry still talking from time to time about wishing for a seat at the table or looking for a seat at the table or being invited to the table, that is a clear sign that that is an organization who is waiting for invitation and very comfortable standing aside and saying, well, I told them what to do. That is not the goal. We need our people to be brave, inspirational leaders, to take risks, and to be very comfortable with that risk. And as I've seen our industry evolve over the last 5 years, especially with the explosion of all the ways to contribute, there's a big differentiator. The people who are excited by that are really rising in the organization, really visible, really providing the kind of role models that young people want to look to and be. The people who are not excited about that are getting very entrenched in individual aspects of the work. It's going to be this method, or we can't lose this kind of protection, or this kind of accuracy, or we have to qualify certain things. And it's not that those things aren't important, but they are not the end. They're not the goal.
Great.
Very well said.
In the interest of time, if I have to ask each one of you, as you look at 2020, what is it that one thing that you do right now which you would keep, cherish, and probably even nurture? And what are the 2 things that you would kill in a hurry and replace with something more meaningful?
You didn't even give us any advance warning on that one, did you?
You know my answer on that one.
I would kill this notion of impressions as a meaningful measure. We're much more focused on expressions. When we look at people's reference to Coca-Cola, in the internet space, there's like 146 million of them. 120 came from people. They didn't come. We were only the other 20 million. So it's much more important for people to express about the brand than it is just that a click rate or things like that. I think that took us down the wrong path that we have to unwind. Now, large companies are built on that basis, but I do think that it's more going to be about engagement at an expression level and particularly at an advocate level.
Okay, Eric?
I think in terms of the keep and the cherish, we're doing a lot more around graduate programs in markets like South Africa and China to develop new people into the industry and to move them across our businesses so they have a holistic view of what's going on in the world. I'd like us to see that expand massively because I think, coming back to Joan's point, we need specialists, we need more specialists, but we need more integrators. And I think you just need a frame of mind, which means that you look at the issue in the round and the client's issue in the round and not just in a silo. And I would say as part of that, our best relationships with clients are ones where we're really involved with their business. However smart you are, it's really difficult to have an insight and to make the kind of impact that Joan's talking about unless you understand what the client's going through. Mm-hmm. And that's not about seat at the table, that's just being part of the team and on site as much as possible and understanding the context of what's going on.
What would you kill?
I think I'd kill the cost-plus model of the way that we currently operate. Mm-hmm. I'd find a way of clients acting on what they see as bad behaviour. And I think clients often see bad behaviour in the industry, and price then dominates things.
Okay. Joan?
So I think the things that we need to nurture that are emerging today, and I would not say they're defining today, but the emerging fields of taking everything we do and making it projective forward and scenario-based will be incredibly important, because we will not have the luxury of qualification or sequential element evaluation. We need to be moving with consumers, and we need to be moving with the speed of our businesses. So taking something as simple as share data, which we all spend a lot of time with, and instead of reporting it, looking ahead to see what the leading indicators are, projecting the likelihood of growing share, when to grow share, what it will take to grow share. These are pretty big shifts for our business, and places where we don't always find partners who are ready to go there. And the scenario planning, even into storytelling, will become important as we try to be much more forward-looking. And it's easy to do scenario planning. It's harder to to see the milestones, to see which way things are going. So we can describe a lot of things today, and I think I see a lot of that happening very positively. But getting the signposts clear, getting slightly ahead and projecting forward so that we can make businesses ahead of our competitors and fuel disruptive growth will be incredibly important. What I think we need to get rid of is believing that a method, particularly survey research, but putting that aside for the moment, that any one method will be a solution to anything. We have to be methodology agnostic, we have to be integrative and creative, and we have to be able to let go of one of the foundational premises of our work. We are all, probably most of us, brought into the research industry with almost a dogmatic belief that representation is everything. And some people have heard me talk about the need for greater representation in certain kinds of work. But we have to let go of the idea that representative something is the only way to learn. And I still hear people saying, oh, that social media thing, that's not really going to pan out. We will learn enormously whether they're representative or not. And if you take Joe's point on impressions, if you take that philosophy into engagement in everything we do, iteration and co-creation with our consumers, and let go, based on what we're trying to learn, of the idea that they have to be some structured scientific definition of rep, we'll learn a lot faster.
Absolutely. Great. Kevin?
Well, I think the panelists made a lot of the good points. Why not? If you want to clap, we can clap. But the one thing I wanted to add was the thing I would keep in the industry and just in general is this whole notion of kind of curiosity. And I think that's when my first job, I got an MBA out of Carnegie Mellon, and I went to work for Bank of America in marketing research. And the thing about that I enjoyed was I was a curious person, and I was always interested in how things worked, how people thought, how they felt, how they acted. And I would never want to see that go away. Now, the methods are going to change, and the models are going to change, and all that. But that's what fuels this industry. I took it the next level to go to academia so I could spend all my time thinking about this and how to apply it and everything. But I think that curiosity is the fuel for everything. You want to learn about people, you want to learn about techniques, you want to learn about your company and why they're doing well or not. So that, I think, is really the key thing. And then a lot of, in terms of the changes that need to be made, I think have already been said in terms of being integrative, in terms of realizing there's not one solution. The pseudoscience bothers me sometimes, and the sort of this is your one answer. And I don't think, unfortunately, it's that simple. But at the same time, we're going to have to find ways to reduce that. But curiosity, I think, is crucial. You know,
Kevin, if I could just build on curiosity. Something I say inside our company a lot is you have to actually like human beings. Right. And we are so often at arm's length from the people we say we're trying to serve when we really spend time with them, which we try to prioritize very heavily for everyone in our organization, not just our market researchers. Right. But I often tell people, if you're not passionate about people and that little bit of improvement every day, please don't be in market research.
Given that we have this really powerful panel, I would like to throw the session open to the audience. If you want to ask any questions, we would be more than happy to answer. Are there mics going around?
You probably need to bring the lights up.
Yeah, there are some people with mic in that corner over there. So if anybody wants to ask any question, we'd be more than happy. Just say your name and what company you represent, and then.
Michael Nusrella, Novartis Pharmaceuticals. So there's a lot of conversation around the need for upscaling talent, and the talent equation is obviously one of the most important things we need to figure out as an industry. Be curious to hear what you guys think are sort of the top 2 or 3 skills that the talent in this industry needs to bring to the table when you're looking for people that are going to help you find your business solutions.
You want to go?
Yeah,
top two or three skills that you look for.
I think Kevin's point about curiosity is, I think, absolutely spot on. It's the fuel for a lot of things. I think certainly on our side of things, we need to be very proactive. It's not a matter of waiting for our clients to ask us for things. We need to actually have people who are in the supermarket on a Saturday and are thinking about why someone's buying that as opposed to that. And so it's partly the curiosity, but then I want those people to go to their client on Monday morning and say, I was at Kroger on Saturday and I saw this and it sparked a thought. And so it's that mixture of curiosity and proactiveness that I think makes really good people on our side of it. I would also say, I don't fundamentally disagree with the idea that survey is becoming less important and fieldwork's becoming less important, but I think we also need to be careful that there is a skill around that is a really important skill, and actually doing good, high-quality survey work is incredibly important. So in all of the conversation about integration, and I don't want us to lose the importance of actually having people who are technically skilled at what they do and in whom clients can have confidence that actually what they do is projectable and does have validity.
If you can just add to that, there are, in my opinion, 2 additional skills. You referred to it earlier on. Ability to connect dots, see patterns is another skill. And then the next one is telling a story with a lot of passion and conviction. Because that alone can drive a fair amount of action. So those would be other skills that one would be looking
and I think it is we have a much more rounded group of people in the business now. And he's here somewhere, but we have a creative director who is the founder of a design agency.
Fantastic.
And we have a creative director because how we actually communicate our insights to clients is incredibly important. It's not a kind of, let's just do a better PowerPoint. It can fundamentally change the way that clients receive things and are inspired. So I don't think there is a single skill. We need a much broader mix of people who have worked on the client side, people who have come from creative industries, people who understand the media, people who are technically good. It's a much wider group of people that we need.
Totally agree. And I think the one thing that we see as the differentiator among the people who really make the difference at the senior levels in the company is leadership. Yep. And because there isn't anything about any of our jobs in any part of business where leadership by influence isn't the primary thing that someone has to do.
I see a hand up there. Yep.
Stan Fetterman, Telmar. From one stand to another, I'd like to know what the moderator thinks we should keep and what we should kill.
That's for you. For you.
What we should keep and what we should kill.
Keep the panel.
Keep the panel. Yeah, keep the panel. No, it's a tough one to answer. But if I have to keep something, I think one thing that I would keep is the innovation that we have seen in the area of research that we have witnessed over the last few years. I think we should not only keep it, but we should, water it every day and watch it grow and maybe enable it to grow even faster, because that's going to be really critical. if I have to kill something, it is the whole fixation on techniques. I'm not saying that you should kill the techniques, but you should kill the fixation on techniques, because that sometimes can be a detractor for progress as we go forward, because you suddenly create a technique and you fall in love with it and you don't want to let go. And then, you have a square peg and everything looks like and you want to fit it into any kind of hole that you see. So fixation on technique is something that I would like to kill.
Although, to Eric's point, when we're doing it, we need to do it well. So while
You mean killing?
No, that too. Beat it to death. No. But survey research will become less important. But as you know, we really want it done with quality when it's done. And I think it's been very easy for people to take things, the world's changing really fast. We don't always need things to be precise, as an excuse to do really poor work. And that there's no excuse.
I have a question. This is Bill Molt from Nielsen. We talked a little bit about what will change by 2020. What I'd like to ask is about the recent past. What's the last thing that you or your organization changed that you're really proud of?
I can go.
I would say for us, I'm talking broadly, one would be the introduction of plant bottle, which is a PET bottle that was 30%. That's 30% made of organic material. I think that was a major innovation in the industry that we actually started licensing out to other companies now. Heinz was the first to take the license. So that was something we're particularly proud of.
From a functional perspective, there are two things that we have done in the last 2 to 3 years which are quite different from what we have done ever in the past. One is at the front end and the other one is at the back end. And what I mean by that is we increasingly put more and more resources on helping the company to think about the overall portfolio strategy. In fact, there's a colleague of mine, Mike Dillon, he's right here with us. So how do we think about the business a bit more holistically? What is the thinking that we need to develop internally? What kind of muscles we need to build? That's one development. The other development is our job doesn't fundamentally get over when you deliver insights, and which is why I did not use the word insights when we talked about the role of the function. Our job is over when we can take somebody and shake them till their teeth rattle and take an action. And if you really have to do that, you need a bunch of people who can facilitate and collaboratively enable a bunch of people to take action based on insights. So we've added a bunch of people who, if you ask them to do a piece of research, even if their life depends on it, they won't be able to do it. But they're the best in class in terms of translating insights into action. So those are two fundamental changes. And if you don't do that, this function could become irrelevant over a period of time.
I think at P&G, there are two things that I would say would be the biggest changes we're most proud of. One is very similar to what Stan said. We've picked the major areas for the company that we believe are most critical to be driven by market and consumer points of view, and we've committed to those with much more visibility and accountability. So strategy choices, our visibility at retail, our initiative ROI and business planning capabilities, and our core brand building capabilities. So we have really dialed up both the quality of that work, but I think at least as importantly, the accountability of that work being right, making a difference, directing decisions, getting ahead of where we are today, being projective, et cetera. But by choosing those areas, I think it's become we're much more able to deliver on a lot of the ideals that we talk about. The second thing is working really hard to dial up the human side of the work, things that enable the kinds of choices around sustainability or what people really want to improve the world. It's not a surprising insight, but it is a deep human insight that people want to do small things to improve the world. So if you look at the Pampers global business, one of the most business and equity building activities that the Pampers brand does is the UNICEF neonatal tetanus vaccine program. 1 pack, 1 vaccine, and the brand, as a force for good, is on track to eradicate neonatal tetanus in the world. But dialing up the human side of what people want to be able to do and helping a corporation to serve that role, I think is the other side of what we're really happy about.
I'd kind of cite two. I mean, one is a much greater commitment to innovation, and I think over the last couple of years we've done a huge amount, big and small, to develop offers which connect how people are behaving online with their purchase behavior, for those clients that say are using need scope segmentation from TNS and link testing from Mill Brown, to fuse that so they get the benefits of both together. So a lot of innovation which is customer-centric, where we're putting aside any differences that we may have organizationally in order to actually offer innovation which is relevant to customers. And then for a more internal viewpoint, we've now got metrics in every of our 900 offices around the world, where we measure obviously the financial performance, but the customer engagement and the employee engagement. And a lot more of our conversations are about making sure that we balance those things, that we're not focused on just one, because we know that to be successful, we need to get that kind of triad working well together.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thanks for being here on the stage.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very nice.